say we have to be conscious of its limits. Matthew Braga reports on technology for CBC News and wrote about this online at our website. He's with me now. Very interesting read, by the way.
Thank you.
But first of all, can you give us a sense of when and how AI can be used by employers when they're hiring?
So there's a couple of companies out there that have been thinking about how to apply AI to this process of hiring. And the idea behind it is when you think of how hiring traditionally goes, it's a very human process, right? You have humans who are making decisions about which resumes to throw in the trash, which ones to put aside, who to call in for an interview, who to maybe turn away, all the way up to who are you actually going to end up hiring in the end. And there's been lots of studies over the years that have shown that, of course, all of the sort of implicit biases that we have really come into play in that process and can result in some people being passed over perhaps unfairly. And so the idea then is that companies are saying, well, what if we could use AI? What if we could take computers, which we often think of as objective, right? These sort of, it's just kind of code that we kind of program, and we can let the computer at least help us make some of these decisions so that we can remove a little bit of that human bias or reduce a little bit of that bias with the help of these impartial bits of code.
All right, so I know technology is getting smarter and smarter, but how does this technology work? How does it kind of sort of, pick the yes pile over the no pile?
Yeah, so we spoke with one company, they're based in Toronto, and they're called Naukri. And what they've done is they say that they want to use AI in essentially the shortlisting process. So if you have a job where you get all these candidates, how do you filter through them and how do you get that short list of people who then still kind of go through that human process of hiring? And so they have come up with, it's basically a video interview system. So a lot of people perhaps now have applied for jobs where they're asked to record these interviews, and then those interviews sometimes get sent to humans who review them. But this company Naukri is saying instead, well, what if we take those videos and we have algorithms analyze them? So analyze your facial movements, the way you speak, the emotion in your voice, the tone, the content of what you're saying. Several thousand data points this company says they're able to look at and essentially use that to score things like empathy, your confidence, your willingness to collaborate with others, your ability to adapt and change to sort of roles as they evolve. All of these things that they say that in conversation with psychologists, they've noticed that there's a couple of these traits, about 15, that can be used as predictors for success, especially for roles where you have to rely a lot on soft skills and sort of people-to-people interaction. And so they're saying, well, we have these algorithms, they can look at sort of the way you talk, score you, and then use that to essentially rate candidates and build these short lists that then go
This is wild. I mean, it kind of makes your head spin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that an algorithm would be able to do all of that.
Yes.
What are the potential benefits for employers and for the people they're interviewing?
So when you talk to companies like Naukri, and also when you hear from companies that want to use this sort of technology, the idea is that they will be able to do a couple of things. It'll help them sort through the volume of candidates that they are receiving faster, more quickly, because if you're receiving tons and tons of them, it's a lot of work to go through these, and so they say that'll reduce that amount of time. You'll also be able to improve the level of diversity in the candidates you're getting, more racially diverse candidates, more gender diverse candidates as well, which is certainly something that a lot of companies want. And the idea being that you use something like Naukri and you're able to reduce some of the bias that perhaps hiring managers and interviewers and recruiters bring into the process themselves. And also, too, the company says this allows you to get better candidates as well, more skilled candidates. That's the pitch that they kind of give to clients.
But there's got to be some concerns around, this application of artificial intelligence, right?
Certainly. So there's a few things that often come up when we talk about artificial intelligence generally, but also particularly in the hiring context. So one of them I kind of alluded to earlier on, this idea that when we bring computers and code into the process, people like to think that machines are objective, that they don't differentiate or they don't bring their own bias into it the way that humans do. But the thing that a lot of researchers, academics, lawyers, social scientists like to point out is that the algorithms are only as good as the people who are training them, who are only as good as sort of the information on which we are training these algorithms as well. And so that's why you have companies paying more attention, including Naukri, to the diversity on the team that are actually building these algorithms, the diversity in the data on which these algorithms are trained. So that's one interesting...
humans make the algorithm, is what you're saying.
Exactly, right. And so people are kind of coming alive to this idea that, well, if you have an algorithm that is only trained on, and we've seen this happen, especially with facial recognition, where companies in the past perhaps only trained their facial recognition algorithms on a very narrow subset of the population. In some cases, we've seen a couple of years back, facial recognition algorithms only trained on white men meant that the facial recognition algorithms performed very well on that subset of the population, but not so well on women and people of color, which not so great when you're maybe making a hiring AI for the hiring process. And so things like this is often what people mention. And then we also talked to some experts as well that really pointed out that this is only one part of the hiring process, that you can create an AI that makes the process a little bit more streamlined or reduces the bias when you're creating these shortlists. But what about the company's overall culture, right? What happens to these people once they're actually hired and brought on to companies? We had some good insight from Sadia Muzaffar, who's an entrepreneur. She founded Tech Girls Canada, and you can read more comments on that from her in our article on the one